knew the waterways and to see the best. So in that vein, I've just put on my normal clothes that I wear at work. And we're going to look at Mentor. So our presenters are Hanno Coetzee, Senior Technical Lead and OutSystems MVP from Phoenix in Sydney, Australia, who is number 39 in the world in the OutSystems community. I checked today, Hanno, you're number 39, and that's including OutSystems staff. So we're very honoured to have Hanno. We're also honoured and very privileged to have Arjun Kapoor, who's a senior solution architect from OutSystems themselves, who is going to give us a demo of Mentor as it is today. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Hanno, and he's going to walk us through his experience with OutSystems AI Mentor. Over to you, Hanno.
Thank you, Stuart, for that wonderful introduction. I'll take over screen sharing, if you don't mind. Alrighty, so I'll be talking about exploring Mentor, some experiments and findings. So the what of today? I'll start with a little disclaimer. I'll dive into the why. Why did I do this? And then the how. How did I go about it? And then I'll end with a conclusion. So hopefully not too boring, not too long. I'll try and keep it lighthearted as much as I can. So yeah, let's get into it. For the disclaimer, I just want to preface this with I had the privilege of having access to the EAP, which is the Early Access Program for Mentor. So a lot of what I worked with and discovered were earlier prototypes than what Arjun will be displaying or demoing today. And what I'm sharing is just my experience, my opinions. It doesn't mean that that reflects necessarily the opinion or the view of OutSystems or PhoenixDX in that sense. So just try and take it that way. All right. So the next one is the why. Why did I do this? Right. So I'm curious is the first answer. The second one is it's AI and AI is all the rage. So, diving into the why a little bit more is, what can this tool do? So we need to understand what it's about. How can this help us? Why is it important? There was a lot of focus on AI. There's a lot of push from OutSystems as well with Mentor. And I wanted to understand why that is and what are the benefits to this. So how did I go about it? I set up 3 experiments for myself. One of the few times I actually plan things ahead in my personal life. So I set up 3 experiments for this. One was I wanted to see and understand what are the prompts that I can and should use to get the results, and how should I tweak those to get the results I want. Then I also wanted to look at the interoperability between Mentor and ODC Studio. The reason for that is, I'm starting to work on something, but let's assume at this point Mentor can do certain things, and when I start working at ODC Studio, I realize it might be easier in Mentor, but I don't want to restart every time, or the other way around. If I work in Mentor and I start building out an application, can I then modify it in ODC? And then if I do ODC Studio, and then if I want to go back to Mentor, does that work? So that was just something that I was curious about. And then a third experiment, which I haven't quite got to yet, due to holidays and family responsibilities and things, was just exploration. So starting off with, I don't have a clear idea about what I want to do, but how can Mentor guide me into, or guide me to the best answer for that small idea I had. And then, yeah, we'll touch on the conclusion about what I liked, what I didn't like, and some other thoughts. All right, so the first experiment I did was the prompt tests. So, how do you prompt the system? What does it know? What's the context that it has? So my initial prompt was similar to what's on screen here. I did a number of them. I'm not going to share all of them, but I did a number of them. Some of them yielded weird results. Again, with the EAP, sometimes what I typed didn't make sense, so the model didn't understand me. So again, what's the answer I want to get to? I also need to ask the right question. That's not just with AI, it goes with humans as well. Sometimes you need to adjust your question to get the answer you seek. Right, so with this prompt, it's a fairly detailed prompt. There's even a spelling mistake in there. I didn't fix it. So point number 4, I misspelled packaging, but we know AI is fairly good at inferring from spelling mistakes. So what I did was I took again, subdivided the experiment into two parts. One was I prompted directly in Mentor, so you've got a text box where you input your prompt, and then the other option is to upload a specification document, which is also just on the Mentor screen, well, at least when I worked on it. That requirements document, I took an approach where I uploaded a sample to ChatGPT, and then I would ask ChatGPT to generate for me a requirements document that's similar to that specification based on the prompt that I've given it here. So the reason I did that was because I was doing a number of experiments. I didn't have the time to go and create those specification documents myself. Now you could ask the question, using AI to train AI or AI to infer from AI. I don't think that was really an issue here. I think ChatGPT did okay with this prompt in particular. And if we look at the results to the right here, they've got different data structures. But okay, so sorry, one step back. So the result in the middle here, this is from the prompt directly in Mentor. So you've got a data model that's got good relationships connecting them, and it's got screens that relate to those. And then on the right, this is the result from the specification document that ChatGPT generated for me. So the data model looks a bit different. There's a few unconnected entities, which doesn't really make sense because we would want all our data to be related based on the specification I gave. And then it's got a number of extra screens that we don't see on the left. But the types of screens and the detail of the entity was also quite different in that. Now, again, maybe with my limited knowledge of AI and the underpinnings of it, I do know that when you query an AI engine like ChatGPT or Grok or whatever system you're using, the intention is not that it gives you the exact same answer every time. So, I'm happy with the results I got because it gave me information that I wanted. I didn't want it to be 100% spot on. I wanted to understand what happens when I do this. Right, so I did a few experiments like this, got interesting results, which the conclusion from this prompt test to me was I need to get better at specifying what I want, because the model doesn't just know. It doesn't have intuition. It doesn't understand my context. I need to give it the full context, right? So I thought, okay, let's go to the extreme of laziness, right? Because I like to be lazy, but not in a bad way. I like to put in as little effort to get the maximum output, right? So what I did next was I tried to go with a single sentence prompt. So give it as little context as possible and see what comes out. So this one was interesting because Mentor seemed to be fairly intuitive. It gave me a pretty good answer in the sense of a fairly well-connected data model and screens that make sense based on my single sentence of a document workflow application. The challenge I had here was with ChatGPT. It didn't do too well with the single sentence to generate the full specification document. I don't think it understood the full context. So again, you'll see it did a few things a little differently. And then obviously Mentor interpreting that specification document. The one thing I noticed was it did create the user role in both, which was interesting to me. So it's a little bit random. I didn't expect that, but it was consistent across both. And then I'd analyzed this a bit more, and what initially to me was like, oh no, this doesn't make sense, but it's very much the same thing. It's just happening in a different way. So back to the previous comment I made is AI gives you an answer, but it's never exactly the same answer. So you give it the same prompt, but it gives you a different answer. And I think this is what started happening here. So one is the direct prompt, one is the document. It's similar prompts, and it gives me a similar answer, which to me was, a good result in this one. Again, I didn't go for a specific result. I just wanted to understand what it can get me to. All right, so that's another of the prompt tests. Got a little bored after a few sentences. So then I tried to look at the interoperability between ODC Studio and Mentor. And this to me was surprisingly robust at the time that I tested, right? So again, EAP, a lot of things didn't work, but also a lot of things did work, which surprised me quite a bit. So what I did here was in one of the approaches, I created a new application in ODC Studio. So I started from the other side. I didn't start in Mentor because the reason I did that was I knew at this point Mentor worked and I could open it in ODC Studio. The reason I know that is, and I'm sure Arjun will show us, is when you, maybe I should not steal your thunder, Arjun. I'll let you show it. So I looked at this from the ODC Studio perspective, and I created an app called AAA Convenience. So, it's an empty app, empty shell. So there's no context for the app editor or Mentor to know, what I'm trying to do here. I was surprised that it would suggest me entities based on the application name. So the context it had was the application name, and it did pretty well give me products and customers. So like, okay, that makes sense. So it's got a little bit of context and it can do a lot with it. So I played around with that, added the entities in the app editor, and then I would open it in ODC Studio again, and that worked really well. What I did as well is I tried to add entities in ODC Studio, but those entities didn't show up in the app editor at the time. I know there were things that were still being worked on, but what did work was when I wanted to add more entities, the app editor did have the context of the entities that I created in ODC Studio. So it was aware of the meta model. It just didn't have that ability to show it on the interface. So that was great. One of the negatives at this point was I had a really, really hard time to get it to generate static entities. I did reach out to the team, and they did give me a workaround for that, how to coax it into generating static entities. So glad that I could work around that. But one thing that I really liked was when I scaffolded screens from the entities that I created, those would show up in the app editor every single time. And yeah, that was great. So adding entities in the app editor would also generate screens, and those would also show up in ODC Studio every time. All right, so that's that. In terms of conclusion, what did I get to is that I enjoyed it. It was quite fun. It's interesting to play around with these tools, as it is interesting to play around with all the other AI tools that you have. So that the important thing that I think that I took away from this is I need to ask the right questions. I need to give the right context. I can't expect the model to know what I want. And this is a tool to help us accelerate development, to help us accelerate bringing our ideas to life. This tool is not a replacement for developers. It's not a replacement for your development team. It's an accelerator that you can use to help you validate ideas as well. What I liked about the EAP specifically was the responsiveness of the team. It was great to engage with a team that would, feedback to you like, hey, try this, try that. Yes, we're working on this. Okay, we're aware of this. Thank you for your feedback here. So that was really good. And I think the final thing I want to say is I think it's going to improve a lot. I'm really excited to see Arjun's demo. I know there's been a number of improvements since I worked on that on my experiments here. So yeah, over to you, Arjun. Thank you.
Awesome, Hanno, thank you. I do have a follow-up question, right? So in your experience of using Mentor, if you had to throw a number as to how much it accelerated your ability to build an app faster, what would you say in rough estimates?
So, I mean, it's hard to, sorry, I'm trying to find the words. I'm trying to compare it to something.
Yep.
So if we look at the early days of OutSystems, we had scaffolding that was not all the rage, but that was one of the big things, right? So you create an entity, you can drag it, you scaffold it builds your menus. You can bootstrap data from Excel. Those were the things that really accelerated a lot of things for us early days in OutSystems. So if I take that as a comparison, to me, Mentor is similar to that, where I give it, a hint of what I want to build, and it generates data structures, it generates screens, it generates a flow that I can see, okay, I'm not 100% with my idea. I need to adjust a few things, right? Or I need to be more specific about other things. So it helps me get from 0 to 1. If 1 is, starting to have an accepted direction of where you want to go, it helps me to get from 0 to 1 pretty quickly.
So I think that's a great description of Mentor that you've given. I personally have often described it as sequence of scaffolding or scaffolding on steroids. I think it's getting you from 0 to 1 is a great analogy. I'm going to use it. I'm stealing it. And I will also share my screen and jump into my demonstration. Just to jog everyone's memory, my name is Arj. I'm a senior solution architect for OutSystems. I'm going to be showcasing Mentor to you today. The thing that you're looking at right now is not Mentor. This is good old-fashioned Service Studio, and this is how some of you may be accustomed to building applications in OutSystems, but Mentor was generally available at the end of January, I believe, and the intent that OutSystems has is that point forward, you would use Mentor to produce the 0 to 1 version of your application and use that as a foundation to start developing your app on. So just to reiterate what was said before, this is a facilitator for developers. So it's if anyone in the business or anyone in your team hints to the fact that, hey, this means our development is going to be 10x, 20x faster than it was, no. It gets you to a good foundation, a starting point quicker, but there's still development work that needs to be done. That will vary to what degree and how much needs to be done, depends on the complexity of the use case. So this is what you would build your app in typically, but now would transition to this sort of screen, which is a lot more chat types interface. And the very first thing I can do is I can either type in a prompt for a use case that I want to build out, or I can provide a business requirements document. There were some interesting findings that you shared around what prompting works. I have a viewpoint on it. So generally the way I think about it, how to prompt is the specificity of the requirements document needs to align with your vision of the app. If you have a very specific vision of what that application needs to be in terms of what the tables are and what the attributes are and what the screens are, then that specificity needs to be reflected in the document that gets fed into Mentor. And what that will avoid is a mismatch in what Mentor produces versus what you expect. So if what you're looking for is simply an idea of what an app might look like, 3 words will suffice. But if you have a very clear idea of what that app needs to be, then make sure that that's documented in a requirements document. What I personally find is that Mentor is very good at generating tables. It's very good at producing roles, screens to go with those tables and provide basic CRUD functionality. But anything that's heavy lifting in terms of logic is still, there's much left to be desired there from Mentor, but that is on our roadmap. It's going to come, whether that's mid of this year or towards the end of this year, but this is a product that's constantly evolving now. So more to come on the logic space, but it's pretty good as far as data and screens are concerned. So my typical prompt, let me zoom in so everyone can read, is I give it a, if I know what sort of entities I want, in this case, I'm trying to reproduce an order management app, I will tell it I want orders, accounts, invoices, opportunities, etc. in my business requirements document. And I will also give it some roles. These may not be roles from a technical perspective, but they certainly represent roles or personas that will be interacting with my application. So I at least like to have that level of detail in my requirements. And then different AI chatbots or agents will give you different types of requirements document. What I find is that anything that has too much hierarchy it tends to not do very well parsing these requirements documents. So try to have a flat structure. So in this case, there's a heading and there's a subheading. Within that, there is a table name and there's a bullet point describing the attributes. That's a bit too much hierarchy for Mentor, I find. So if we were to transform this to a flatter structure, something like this, for example, where there is name of the table separated by hyphen, bunch of attributes that are comma separated, it's a lot more digestible. It has to do less work in parsing data and more work in interpreting it, which is where we really want to be using this thing. So we have this requirements document. It can be fed into Mentor in Word, PDF, and text types. We are going to be supporting Excel files with a list of requirements at some point. That hasn't come through yet. So let's feed that in. I won't generate the app from scratch. It may take anywhere between 3 to 10 minutes, depending on how much generation needs to be done. But I have pre-generated an application right before this call. But at the moment, what this is doing is parsing the requirements document, and it's giving us a quick interpretation. Now, this may or may not be what ends up getting built. This is first impressions and gives the developer or the business user a place of intervention. This is where you'd also call out if you'd want tables or personas to be built from scratch or reutilized from what already exists in your environment. Now, because I'm generating an order management app, an order management app already exists in my environment. So what you'll find is that a lot of these data entities have this tiny OutSystems logo next to them, indicating that it's reusing what's in my environment as opposed to creating new stuff. And we can obviously redirect it. We can say, no, this is a different account in a different context, generate in this context using AI, or we can let it leverage what's there already. What this thing can also do is leverage existing themes or any style guides that you may have present in your environment. Now, if you call them out very specifically which one you want to use in the requirements document, it'll go and fetch that. But if you don't, it's going to use the one that's most referenced theme in your environment. So my environment has a base theme. It's just going to use that and apply that to my app. When I hit generate, this is where it goes away and takes a few minutes. But really what it's doing is it's producing the OutSystems markup language, which is basically a visual representation that you see of the application in Service Studio. So this is all codified in OutSystems markup language. So it's going to produce that XML so that like any other application, a Mentor app can also then be accessed through the studio. It's going to produce the .NET code that's needed to get data into entities. It's going to produce the SQL to generate the entities as well as any front end associated with those apps. What it will also do is that it will generate some sample data, which may or may not be context relevant. I find that it's not very great at loading data if you do a good job of communicating context in requirements documents, which I tend to do, it'll do a okay job of loading some sample data in. But if there's no context there, it'll just load stuff that isn't really relevant. But what it also does, it gives you accelerators to then modify that data. So if we let this development process finish, the output app would look something like this. This doesn't look very different to a typical OutSystems application, at least in terms of the login screen. And now if I go into the app, what you'll find is that it's very light on functionality, but it does a good job of representing information that exists in tables. So there's simple dashboard, a table view that represents all of the information that sits in the different orders. And then if I go into a specific order, it can give me more detail. Now, isn't the most appealing screen. What it is an accelerator, a foundation for me to start building upon. Okay, so this is the view where you get to do fine-tuning of applications. You've uploaded business requirements document, and an app has been produced. This is where you get to do your fine-tuning. This is your Mentor Studio, if you will. This is a map of all of the different screens that have been produced by Mentor. On the side, I've got tables that have been produced as well as roles. Let's say I want to modify roles. I can click on that little key icon and then gives me all of the different entities and what sort of access do I get to those entities. Modification in this interface is entirely by prompting. So let's say I want to add a new data type, call it customer, for example. I'm just going to type in customer, and I won't be able to define an entity in a typical sense, because this is where we are sort of creating a prompt in some sense. So I can select the customer's type, and it will do its best effort in terms of producing a customer's entity based on the context in which it's operating, which is an order management application. And when you do that, it's introduced a few screens into my application. And in purple, it's also highlighted all of the different apps to which changes have been made. Similarly, you're not just limited to making these changes at the root level. So you don't just create entities at the top level, you can modify attributes that go within those entities as well. So for example, if an account, in this case, has a status which is a field. So I think there's a question there. Let me address the question. Yes. No, I wouldn't say. So the question is, will the developers move to using AI Mentor most of the time and then only polishing details in ODC Studio? I don't think we're there yet. So where we are right now is you produce an application that maybe accelerates the first 2 weeks of development effort from the time you have a requirements document. And then from there, you spend a considerable amount of time building the app as you would in OutSystems, and OutSystems gets the job done faster than traditional development. But we're not at a point where configuration in OutSystems can be called polishing. We're not there yet. That's the North Star. We want to get to a stage where all developers have to do is polish, but it's a few months from that point. So right now I call it an initial version or a basic framework of an application, and then develop as you would in OutSystems. Any additions to that, Hanno?
No, I agree with that. And I guess just to add to that, that's what I wanted to understand. You know, what is this tool doing for me at the moment? Is it replacing me, or is it just a toolkit, another tool in my toolkit that I can use, to accelerate what I do? So work smarter and not harder to get to the end result. Absolutely.
And I believe it's certainly on the lines of latter. Replacement was never the intent. And I don't think, certainly, even if you just look at AI in general, I don't think any AI is sophisticated enough to do that. There's a lot to be desired in terms of going from having being able to produce code that does what's being asked to then being able to do inferences. Okay, I've produced this code, what do I do next? There is no capability that does that level of work. And in that sense, there's always going to be a need for developers to put apps together, but in its present state, base version and then build upon it. I personally find that it really doesn't accelerate more than first 2 to 3 weeks of an app. Beyond that, custom development is still the way to go. Okay, so let's say I've now introduced that customer, and once I hit publish, that will get reflected in the application that's being produced. So this doesn't work. This doesn't just work for new apps. It also works for existing apps. So I have a pre-built order management solution. If I were to edit that with Mentor, now it will give me a list of entities with their respective attributes built by developer in Service Studio, and will let me modify it. Now, a common question, I think another developer asked me this. It's like, I'm looking to build out a very specific entity. I want it to be a static entity with these attributes in it. But how do I get Mentor to do that? That's, I don't think, the right use of Mentor. So if that is the intent, go to Studio and do it that way. The idea of Mentor is to produce blocks of solution. So it's meant to be end user driven than being developer driven or development driven. So describe what you want in terms of functionality, in terms of screens and tables. Don't worry about whether it's static or non-static. If that's the level of control you want, then Studio is your friend and you use that interface for it. So the app that Mentor produced for us looks something like this. It's, as you can see, it's loaded up some data. This may not be the best data that we need. And in case we need to override it, I can go into the manage app data. I wonder what went wrong. Let's see. There you go. So we go into the manage app data, and then it gives us these Excel upload widgets where I can download an Excel file that represents or is like a template for the table that's been built under the hood that I can replace with my own information and use that to override sample data that was produced by Mentor. So this is what my app looks like right now. What I intend to build is an app that looks something like this. So that's a good compare and contrast between what Mentor produces and what the output looks like. So you can imagine that there's a good 4 to 6 weeks of effort that will take to go from an app that looks something like this to an app that is usable by the end user and looks something like this. But it gives us a good starting point nonetheless. And it takes away a lot of pain of setting up an app and the framework. That's the Mentor demo. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A section. I'll just address them as we go.
Thank you, Arjun. We're also going to just do a panel discussion now. Which is really just code for, yes, just ask questions, and we'll get Hanno and Arjun to answer them. Let's have a look. There is a question that has just been added there. So can AI Mentor analyze sample images or GIFs in a document and generate an application?
Not in its present state, but in my conversation with product, there was an intent to have that functionality where, based on screenshots, it can produce requirements. A lot of that is being driven by our customers that don't really have firm requirements document for legacy solutions that they have in place already. What they have is tons and tons of screenshots and videos of these systems being used, and they want to be able to utilize that to generate a requirements document. So it's in the roadmap, off the roadmap, but it's not in its present state. It's going to come.
Awesome. Thank you. Hanno, did you have anything to it?
Yeah, two things. One, just adding on to the images one, I think, real world scenario that with present state and not considering Mentor is, if you have to rebuild a like for like, or application like for like, so you have a legacy application or replace it, a lot of times there aren't any specifications for that. So that's a very good question. But the challenge you have with that is inevitably you miss functionality, you miss business rules, you miss a lot of things. So it may get there, but you'll still have that underlying problem of missing some requirements. But again, it can help you get from 0 to 1 quicker, right? So get that initial grunt work out of the way. And then the second one was maybe it's a different discussion that we can start on it, but who is Mentor for, right? So up until this point, we've only been talking developer, not to go down the Microsoft route, but we're focusing on developers, and the way that I see it personally is we're opening up the ecosystem to more people, and not just citizen developers anymore, and not just the full stack developers, but also your BAs, your designers potentially. With a little training, they can validate ideas easier. They don't need a developer to help them get there, and they can work out flows, they can work out how these things fit together, and get to that proof of concept or that initial approval for design, just to validate the idea.
Awesome, thank you. This is probably just a quick one. Does AI Mentor also generate bugs? I guess someone's thinking, well, is it working with a developer?
Great question. Great question. Where do I start? So the way I think about it is, if you run, so we have a code quality assessment tool in OutSystems. Anything that's produced by Mentor, if you run that through code quality, it's going to come out green. So it's not producing tech debt. So in that sense, the quality of code is production ready. The code itself is ready for production. That's not to say that the app is ready for production functionally. Like I said, a bit of work needs to be done to get it in shape to be production ready. So it does produce functional bugs for a very simple reason that the app is not ready for production. It needs to be worked on. It's not what you want your end users using. So yes, but the reason for that is it's not producing a final product. It's producing an accelerator or a starting point. And so to that answer to that question is yes and no.
Right, awesome, thank you. So here's a good one. Is it possible to build a system to display data that's only assigned to the logged in user, like when we have a requirement to assign data to specific users?
Yeah. So great question. And this is something worthy of experimentation. I don't have an answer off the top of my head. What we can do though is link any entity that you want in your system to a specific user. So there is a way of incorporating a reference to a user ID for any specific record in the app that's built by Mentor. Whether that then leads to a screen where the data is filtered by the current logged in user, I'm not sure. I can find out. But this is something that requires experimentation. A lot of what Mentor does is not deterministic by design. So these features that we're talking about, there isn't necessarily any controlled deployment of these features in OutSystems, simply because of the nature of AI. So experiment with it and then find out if that is the case. My intuition says it will get you partially way there, where you can link users to specific records, but not have a filtered view. So for that, you'll have to go into Studio and make those filters yourself. That's my intuition.
Awesome. So it is possible, but check it and experiment. Thank you. Right. This one's not anonymous. This is from Leon. Thanks, Leon. I can see that Mentor can help to generate ideas for a new app, so entities and screens. I was just wondering if having to swap between the Mentor app editor and ODC Studio, would that add overhead in the dev process? And is it planned to place Mentor inside ODC Studio?
I can talk to the fact that having Mentor versus Studio separately. So at the moment, there is no plans of incorporating Mentor within Studio. That's not on the roadmap. But if you feel strongly about this, raise it on the OutSystems Ideas portal. It makes sense why developers would want all dev work consolidated in one place. But the reason why there's a separation is because the team is working towards having a separate role for Mentor developers versus a power user developer that can develop across Mentor and Studio. The reason for that delineation is that there is a group of people, i.e. a tech-enabled business user, that would want to get the app to a certain level of complexity before handing that over to the IT user. And for that reason, there is a separation that's been created. And across all of our users, there's a very strong feedback that owners of the OutSystems platform don't want business users mucking about Studio. So there's a reason for why that separation has been created. As a natural consequence of this separation, and one of the reasons why Mentor was developed is to facilitate a better or enhanced collaboration between IT and business. So if business can come up with an idea and start building in Mentor, and then when it's time to do all the plumbing and the integrations and complexity of UI, at that point hand over to IT, that is the state that we're trying to get to with Mentor or Studio.
You're on mute, Stuart. But before you go, I agree with that. And maybe just another perspective is, I don't think the intention is that a developer or a business user or a designer, whoever uses this, will be switching between the two. They each have specific responsibilities or capabilities, and they should be used in accordance to that. So a developer typically will know what they want to do, and you won't use Mentor for that. Mentor is it suggests you things. It has a context, and it tries to help guide you somewhere. Whereas if you're a developer and you have a requirement, you know what you need to do. So you do that in Studio. So I think it's important to understand what the separation of responsibilities is between the two.
Oh, good one. Thank you very much. Here's another one, follow on from that. The sort of how many developers it take to screw in a light bulb, but how many developers can use AI Mentor at the same time?
Yeah, I don't know of a limit. Again, this is something that I'm gonna have to find out. But when we ran the early access program, that was run off of a shared instance across a number of customers, and at any given time we had at one point had about 20 developers using Mentor. So
Right.
it handled that fine. But is there a limitation to it? I'm not sure. Is an action on me to find out.
Awesome. Thank you. What else? A lot of good questions here. So from Natty, as you mentioned earlier, when generating an application, it can also add functionality from pre-existing applications.
Yeah.
But what if there are no public functions? How does it do it then?
So I want to I used the generic term functionalities, and I was deliberately ambiguous there. So in its present state, OutSystems can only reuse entities. So if your app requires a table called customers and there's already a customers table that is set to public, then it will be able to reference that table in the app should you need to. Now, what does that mean? It means any entities, any integrations that you have built through Data Fabric, which brings integrations into OutSystems as an entity, will be able to be reused if they're public. Any tables that you built yourself will be able to be reused. But what it can't reuse at the moment is service actions, server actions, client actions, APIs. Those can't, in its present state, can't be reused yet.
Ah, right. Okay. Thank you very much.
But it's on the roadmap. So yes, if anything that's set to public will be able to be reused. Also, one other thing that you can reuse at the moment is theme, which isn't an entity. It is a visual collection of widgets or templates. Those can be used, but that's the only exception to the entity rule.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. I think now, has anyone got quick last chance? Has anyone got any other questions that they want to add? Want to ask? All right. So, Arjun or Hanno, is there any other final pearls of wisdom? We've had so many. There's probably none left. But any final comments that you'd like to add?
I mean, what I would say is use Mentor as much as possible. We call it, I think there's an OutSystems methodology that I'm struggling to recall right now, but it starts with ideate, generate, integrate, or something like that. But the idea is that you experiment with your application, and if your business has a massive backlog of apps that they want to build out, give them an opportunity to play around with Mentor to see which of those ideas and what apps in that backlog have legs to stand on, and use Mentor as a tool to facilitate backlog grooming. And yeah, use it as much as possible. Everything that gets built in Mentor does not need to be developed on and then subsequently pushed into production. It's a tool to facilitate ideation and experimentation.
Thank you, Arjun. Hanno?
that's well said. I agree with that. And you don't know what you don't know, right? So play around, see what you can get to, see what you can learn. Change your perspectives, and then just on the tool itself. I've seen it go through a few iterations now, from where it started to where it is now. The generation speed is pretty good. It doesn't take too long, meaning it doesn't take a day to generate an application. So something that would take me a day or 2 days, it does in 5 to 7 minutes, right? So you get that acceleration. But I think there's a lot that's going to be added to the tool. The tool is going to evolve over the next 6 months, over the next year. So again, it should be an exciting journey. And again, it's not to replace developers. It's not to replace any of us. It's that the tool to help you accelerate. If you look at comparatively the other AI tools in the coding in the code market, for that matter, it doesn't replace anyone. It helps you get there. It explains things. So another way to look at this tool is try your idea and try and understand why what you're trying is not working, or is your idea or what you're trying to communicate, do you have the right words, do you have the right entities or requirements, for that matter. So use it in clever ways, so think outside the box. I think we have an opportunity here to do some interesting things if we think or change our perspective a little bit.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time, both here today and in preparing for today. We're very privileged to have the benefit of your expertise. So I guess for everyone, it's a really exciting time. This is a very exciting tool. So what I'm hearing is give it a shot, see what you can do with it. Use it for apps, use it for POCs, push it to its limit, and gain some acceleration. So I think that's, I don't think we have a quiz. Hey, Margaret, we don't have a quiz today, do we? So I think that's probably it until next time, isn't it?
Yep, not tonight, but it's been an interesting session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Well, look out for next time. It'll be on socials. So, and we'll see you then. Cheers.
Cool. See ya. Bye-bye.